Hello friends, I have a few books here in front of me and I would like to share them with you. They range from runes to Enochian magic to Satanism to alchemy to the dark night of the soul, if you know what that means, to some traditions that are specific to the books, to New Age, including Thelema, to paganism, etc., etc., even the Christian mysticism. So basically, whatever you want, you can probably find it here, except probably for Wicca, but you can trace Wicca back to Golden Dawn, so basically Thelema is related to Wicca. In any case, today I would like to talk to you about this particular book, because I think this book is the single most important book on the occult published in the last 120 years, maybe 170 years, depending on your ideas of what is important in occultism. If I asked 1,000 people interested in the occult what the most important books or the most important writers on the occult in that time period were, I think it would be safe to assume that a lot of people would say Crowley and Blavatsky. If you expand the time frame a few hundred years, you would probably hear John Dee. But I think it's safe to say that Crowley and Blavatsky would be mentioned. But even if you go by the Crowley's definition of magic, which is the art and science of changing the world according to your will, you would still have to agree that there are two components to magic, which are art and science. And I would argue that Thelema is the scientific approach to magic, except of course science in the way we use it worldly is interested in the material physical world, whereas magic is more about metaphysical. Still, the approach, I would say, in Argentum Astrum, in the Ordo Templi Orientis, the approach is scientific, or at least as scientific as it gets. And with Blavatsky it's the same. So if you read pretty much any book by Blavatsky, you would find that it's pretty much a scientific essay on the history, the symbolism, the appropriate garment, the traditions of different people when it comes to working with some kind of esoteric topic. The Theosophical Society, in my view, is as scientific as the AA. And this is where this book comes in, which in my opinion is the art part of this equation. I will talk about the physical appearance of the book more so than about the content. First of all, not to spoil the book, and second of all, because I think that occult books specifically carry not the value of a manual, but a talismanic value, which means the books themselves are, let's say, a sacred object, or in the case of this book, it's a tool that is used to conduct the magnum opus, the great work of alchemy upon you, right? So it's very much active. It's not a manual that teaches you about alchemy. Of course it does teach you about alchemy, but that's not the point of the book. The point of the book is to change who you are, change your connection to the world. That's what the inner alchemy is about. So let's talk about it. This is a hardcover book, bound in cloth. It's shimmering in the light, so it has some golden threads. On the front you can see this feather motif. The book is called Aurorae by Gabriel McCaughry. It's published by Anathema Publishing in 2018. The end papers show this alchemical double fountain allegorical illustration with the sun and golden liquid and the moon and the silvery liquid. Of course, you understand the symbolism, I'm sure. The illustrations here are done by Jose Gabriel Alegría Saboal, who is an excellent artist, of course. You can see the evidence of that by looking close up to the quality of the drawings. They resemble classical etchings, engravings, and they are printed wonderfully, of course, as always with anathema. I will not show you close-ups of all of the illustrations, or even of any other illustrations, just to show respect to the author and the artist. So, this book was printed in 2018 in 3 editions: Standard, Deluxe and Artisanal. This one is Standard. So you can imagine the Deluxe and the Artisanal, if this is a Standard edition. The Standard edition had only about 700 hand-numbered copies, of which this one is number 171 in the silver ink. So the book is about alchemy, and it has a foreword by Shani Oates, and Shani Oates is the maid of the clan of Tubal-Cain. You probably have heard about her if you're interested in the occult. She has published a couple of books herself, one of which I own. It's The Devil's Supper. It's the history of the devil as opposed to Satan. So she draws distinction between the Judeo-Christian or even Christian idea of Satan and the devil, who was a character in rural pagan traditions, and the history of how it all kind of merged. But this book is about alchemy, and the foreword basically summarizes the book. But I think that in order to understand this foreword, you either need to be versed in all of the branches of magic, including Kabbalah, including the Egyptian magic, including Thelema, including books like The Chemical Wedding, and therefore Rosicrucianism, including the Golden Dawn and everything that falls in between. But it's a good summary, of course, but it's not really approachable. And the book itself, again, it talks about alchemy, but the way it kind of conducts the alchemical work is through art. In this case, it's illustrations and poetry. And there are a lot of illustrations and pieces of poetry here, which are equally superb. There was also this nice bookmark included with the book. You can see the quality of the illustrations, and by reading some of the pieces of poetry I'm showing here, you can judge the quality of the poems themselves. But I think this is the only way to approach alchemy in terms of inner alchemy, because you cannot learn alchemy by reading a manual. It is categorically impossible to even talk about alchemy unless you already know alchemy. And that's a big problem. It is categorically impossible to explain alchemy through words. Of course, to write an essay on what alchemy is, that's pointless. That's how you get Isis Unveiled. That's how you get contemporary essays on alchemy. They have no practical value because they do not let you conduct the work. You can open a Wikipedia page on the Philosopher's Stone, read it, and you will not be able to create the stone. So what's the point? And this work, Aurorae, draws on the archetypes of our unconscious. Pretty much, if you are familiar with the works of Carl Jung, you understand the value that this book carries, because it's impossible for you to consciously affect the unconscious in order to understand alchemy, unless you already know alchemy. And this book does exactly that for you. It draws on the archetypes that are already there, because you can invent just a bunch of words, which people have done to explain alchemy. You would just invent a term and that would be it. And people who have not had that experience of alchemy would not understand the words. You would be able to communicate ideas about alchemical processes to other people who are versed in alchemy, but to the outsider it would be useless. But this book, instead of creating new words or new systems of symbols, it draws from the unconscious, which is shared by everyone, because that's how the unconscious works. We have pretty much the same archetypes, regardless of age, race, culture. None of that matters. The archetypes are common. So this is the only way that I can think of to convey the experience of alchemy in a book. And it is done in such a great quality, because it could have been just doodles, as it often is. So you can often see sigils created by dipping a $2 pen in ink and scribbling on a piece of paper unconsciously, like unconscious writing. I'm sure you've heard of it. That's one way, but that's not really a great quality that you get, and the meaning gets blurred because of the fact that the artist's hand is not experienced in conveying ideas through visual means. But of course, here you can see that the artist is proficient, to say the least, and the poetry itself is more than enough to invoke the archetypes that are necessary to convey the idea. That's why I think that this is the book that you want if you want to read alchemy instead of reading about alchemy. If you want to read about alchemy, there is this wonderful book by Elias Ashmole, which is called Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum. Of course, he didn't write the book. He collected the works of British authors on alchemy or related to alchemy. So if you want to read something that is related to alchemy or about alchemy, Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum is the book that I would recommend. Obviously, you can find it easily on the internet. It's public domain. But if you want to read alchemy This is the only book that I'm aware of that you can find, and I believe you can still buy them. Of course, it was printed in 2018, but it was reprinted as a softcover, which is much cheaper, and the softcover looks awesome. It looks excellent, and there was even a foreword added. It was by Denis Poisson. So in that second edition or softcover edition, you get a little more information than in this one, in this fast printing of the first edition. But the book is complete. It doesn't require you to add anything, and reading it, it didn't feel like I want to subtract anything. So highly, highly recommend this book if inner alchemy interests you. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.